Peace, Shabbat Shalom. Uh, Let me just say this. Before the stars were charted and before tribes were able to mark their territories, before empires and prophets and denominations, there was Anu. And Anu is not just a historical figure or a mythological sort of figure, but rather Anu represents divinity personified. In our Sumerian records, Anu presided at the apex of what we call the celestial hierarchy. So that's where your laws came from, destinies came from, everything. What we call the heavens, or An, as it was called, An was the domain of Anu. So not the heavens from, as you may imagine, from like religious indoctrination, but a level of rulership and government that existed over existence. All right, let me introduce myself. I am Chief Yuya, the head Jegna of the Anu Nation. All right, and thank you for coming. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Long before the Torah, long before the Quran, and even before our ancient Kemetic mysteries, the name Anu was already known. And not because Anu demanded worship from slaves, but rather because Anu represented a standard that was more eternal and was bounded by reality. In your most ancient worldview, the divine was not first understood as a source of judgment, but rather of righteous order. Anu was a sustainer of this balance more than like a sky god. Anu was a benchmark of alignment, and the entities beneath Anu, like Enlil or Enki, and the other gods or Elohim, they were separated by jurisdiction of different decrees. So they didn't create laws; they executed them. This pattern of was reflected within the Torah with the Malachim and the other messengers. But about Yah is above all of those, right? So Anu doesn't just represent a being that's sitting somewhere like on a throne in the sky, but Anu represents headship itself, the spiritual archetype of boundary, of covering, of leadership, right? So when one is in Anu, they are in alignment with the universal order. When one moves outside of Anu, they move into disorder and chaos and confusion. So when we say things like return to Anu, we're saying return to your righteous mind, return to your divine instructions, return to your collective purpose, as it was at the beginning. It's going to be again, if you will. So if we look at why this sort of matters now and in these times, we live in a generation where confusion is celebrated, where like my truth is elevated over the truth. And we're in a space now where nations tend to forsake the idea of divine law in favor of moral relativism. But with Anu, the answer lies, let's say, to the chaos, because Anu represents an unchanging law. There's a structure for family. There's a way for men and women to relate to each other in a righteous way. There's order in nature. There's order in Shemaim, or the heavens. There's order in society. And in the changing times that we're in, we have to return to the origin, and not for nostalgia, but the origin as a divine law and a divine pattern. And this is why, like, in ANU Life Global, we say we're not a religion. We are a restoration of the original order. So I want to dig into that a little bit, and I want to speak about a popular story, and it kind of shares what happens when mankind rejects Anu, and what happens when builders seek to create without headship. What happens when divine law is ignored in favor of one's own ego, their ambition, and vain unity. The Tower of Babel story we're going to kind of get into, it shares a lot of that. Um, to understand the supremacy and ancientness of Anu, we have to align ourselves with time, right? Let's begin with time. Time proves that Anu precedes all fragmented doctrines, right? As you read in the Anu way, we can look at the cuneiform of the Sumerian records. That cuneiform, it first appears around like 3300 BCE, right? That's what, when you ever hear him talk about the early dynastic period. That's the early dynastic period. At that point, Anu was already established in the divine pantheon. Anu was referred to as the father of the Elohim, or the father of the gods, and the ruler of An. You have your ancient Kemetic texts, or what some people call the pyramid texts, coming out of Kemet, and those date around 2400 BC, like 2400, 2300 BC, somewhere around there. So the Netir system becomes formalized after the Anu tradition. Then you have the Torah, or the books of Moses, right? And the oldest portions would be like Exodus, Genesis, Job. Those were written down around 1400 BCE, right? Of course, you had Hebrew oral traditions that predate that time, but the Torah itself, it became the canon, and but that was much later than the Sumerian text. You have the Vedas. The Rig Veda dates to about 1200 BC, 1500, 1200 BC. Before that, it was oral tradition. Still after Anu, you have the Zoroastrian Avesta. That's around like 1000 or 600 BCE, somewhere around there. That was like the first religious system where you have this focus of good versus evil, which is not in Anu. And Anu was always order versus chaos. And then you have the Quran, right? That was revealed to Muhammad in 610 CE, you know. So that's like 3,000 years after Anu was already revered and already worshipped, So we get a little understanding of the timeline. And I know you may say, like, so, like, what does that really mean? It means that when we say in the beginning God, or in the beginning Elohim, they're tapping into a concept that was already established in the ancient mind as Anu, or as the Most High, the orderer of the heavens. That so in the beginning, when you read that, those people at that time already knew who was being referred to. So later traditions, like really through cultural memory and fragmented understanding, reframed and rebranded the concept, but they didn't originate it. Anu was existed when the world was still united, before everything was scattered, before there was doctrines, before there was confusion. So Anu is not new, right? Anu is original. When we look at the words in the Yoruba, we have Anu. And Anu, it's just a little longer stretching on the A part. Its translation is compassion, or sometimes, or transliteration. The full name, though, is Anuoluwapo, and that means the mercy of Olodumare, the mercy of Yah is abundant. So that underscores that there's a cultural emphasis of like a divine aligning with the concept of Anu as being benevolent. In the Hebrew, we have Anu. Anu means, or transliterates as a pronoun we or us. So there's a collective identity there. There's an emphasis on unity, on shared purpose with Anu, just idea of coming together under Anu. In the Arabic, you have also Anu. In Arabic, Anu means atom, Atom, like an atom, or a messenger or an angel. And, in atom or messenger of Elah, those kind of represent divine creation, spiritual beings, the communication of what we would call the divine will. It's a multifaceted sort of idea of Anu being the smallest unit of existence and measurement. Even in Igbo you have Anu meaning animal, or it means meat. which is like foundationally represents living, like things that bring life, things that bring sustenance. So again, it links to the idea of Anu as like a provider of life, right? Of course, in the Sumerian, you have Anu or Anuhu, representing the skies or the heavens, and the name of course, an archetype who embodies heaven, who embodies order, um, knowing Anu as the source of all order, all authority. In your Sanskrit, you have Anu again, and it means atom or minute sort of particle, again representing the building blocks of the universe. That I would say interpretation aligns with the concept of Anu being the basis of existence. So when you look at the synthesis of all these ideas, of course, or of the same word, you notice that consistently Anu, like in the Yoruba, is divine compassion. The Hebrew, collective identity. If we look at the Arabic, a divine messenger or the creation. We look at the Igbo, Anu is a source of life or the essence of life. The Sumerian would tell us, supreme authority, the Sanskrit, fundamental existence, right? There's like a convergence that suggests that Anu is not necessarily confined to a single tradition, but is a universal principle that we could say is recognized across cultures or across traditions. So when you start to understand the multifaceted meaning of Anu, it sort of it could enrich your appreciation for significance. It embodies unity, mercy, divine order, the essence of existence. So as we start to move forward uh, today, we're going to kind of explore a little bit more of how that original order eventually led to fragmentation. If we look at the Tower of Babel narrative, right? So I'm going to get into that a little bit for you Bible folks, or even if you're not a Bible folk, read it. Some good stuff in there. But I want to get into the just what that Tower of Babel actually is. Anu represented, the ancient patterns of righteousness, order, and alignment. But eventually, mankind becomes arrogant and begins to drift. So as time passed and as generations passed and multiplied, people began to sort of imagine that they could establish a legacy independent from the governance of the divine. So they sought to build not just kingdoms and cities, but also narratives and legacies apart from Yahuwah's decrees. So now we get like the Tower of Babel. And it's a spiritual parable, but it also is historical. It's a record of mankind's rebellion. The people were united, but they were united in their vanity. When they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens so that we can make a name for ourselves and not be scattered over the face of the whole earth." That's Genesis 11 and 5. That wasn't divine unity. That was a counterfeit unity because it was based on pride. It was based on ego. It was based on the desire for self-rule and not submission to divine will. But let's look at how we're taught, how the story kind of goes. The text then, gives us a really good revelation. If you look at it, if you look at it in the Hebrew, it's Bayid Yahweh Erot et Ha'ir Ve'et Hamigdal Ashir Banu Bene Adam or Benecha Adam. So when you look at that, especially the Migdal, I got my notification still on. Migdal Ashir Banu Ne Pacha Adim. And Yahweh or Yahuwah came down to see the city and the tower that were built by the sons of Adam, right? So if Yah had himself or his divine agents were operating in omniscience, why did they have to descend? Vayid means to descend, to come down, and to go see. Lirot, lirot. Physical beings, you know, that many traditions call gods or Elohim were dispatched to go personally look. They were not acting from omniscience. They came into a physical space, into a physical dimension to observe and to intervene. So that makes certain things clear in the story, that this was not a mystical confusion, but a deliberate divine mind intervention. It was mass hypnosis on a divine scale, a calculated sort of disruption of mental, linguistic, and spiritual harmony. So through that level of manipulation, they fractured humanity's ability to communicate, to align, to build cooperatively according to righteous order. So they didn't tear down the tower physically, they scrambled the consciousness of mankind. Now, here's an important part in this. The text, you heard me say in the Hebrew, migdal. Migdal is the word that was used for tower, but migdal comes from the Hebrew word gadal. And gadal means to make great, or to make important, or to make mighty. So it doesn't mean tower. So it wasn't about the tower reaching to the sky physically. It was about magnifying something. We're going to get into something spiritually and socially. So when we connect that with Babel, which originally was Bavel, that comes from Balal, Balal, if you were saying phonetically. That means to mingle. That means to mix, to confuse. So the Tower of Babel was about magnifying intermingling. It was sort of an attempt to elevate and sanctify lawless mixing without Yah's instructions, blending of cultures, ideas, ambitions, spiritual paths, divine hierarchy, righteous boundaries. So it was a rebellious act in the highest form, not just because of coming together, but because coming together apart from the creators. It was the exaltation of cultural confusion disguised as progress. And because magnified intermingling apart from headship only produces disorder and rebellion, Yahuwah came down to intervene. So what man sort of sought to magnify was rebellion. So Babel became literally and symbolically the birthplace of global disorder and vain unity. Now, it should remind you of the story of Noah, the intermingling and what happened there. So after the intervention, the people became tribalized. Their language just sort of created cultural and spiritual barriers. Different nations arose, fragmented, with corrupted understandings of the divine. Every person retained only fragments of the original sort of truth, we would say. ANU, as a symbol of unity and divine government, became obscured. And in the place of all of that, we get man-made religions, we get empires and idolatry, we get doctrines rooted in control, not alignment. So what began as a righteous order became widespread confusion. What began as unity, divine unity, became competition, spiritual amnesia, pride, right? As a result of the intermingling, or the attempt to intermingle. So the magnification of intermingling, or the Tower of Babel, wasn't a passive event. It's established a pattern. So today we have global systems that scramble perception through teaching, education, media, culture. You have societies that enforce confusion and division through language, through labels, through ideologies that are sick. So just like Babel did, modern powers still ensure that mankind remains mentally scattered and spiritually powerless. So that's the Babel effect, and it still governs a fallen world, that many of us live in today. So if you look at now the restoration, the Tower of Babel, or the magnification of Babel, teaches that unity outside of Yah is fake unity. True oneness only comes under divine headship. So rebellion produces fragmentation unless we return to Anu, the original eternal headship. um, we'll just continue to drift in confusion. Yah's mercy kind of allows what was scattered to be regenerated or restored, and the things that were hidden can be revealed again. And this time, we're in that time. So with ANU Life Global Ministries, there's a rise of being vessels of restoration, um, regathering, not to build towers out of vanity, but to reestablish the house of Anu, which was the original government of righteous love and divine order. So there's an important call in that. I'm explaining what we're doing here with Anu, for anyone who may not have been clear. The Tower of Babel, or the magnification of importance, wasn't the end of the story. It was a disruption, but it was not the destruction of divine order. Yahuwah has always kept a remnant, or a hidden few. And that hidden few holds on to the memory of the original order, the old ways. So the scattering didn't erase Anu, it only veiled the name and veiled the pattern. So when you look throughout history, Yah has always sent prophets and messengers, holy communities, to sort of remind humanity that we're not made to be divided. I'm making a distinction between man and mankind and humanity. We're not made to worship our own ideas. We're not made to build kingdoms of ego, kingdoms of vanity, but we're made to live under divine and righteous governance. So we're made to be a nation. We're made to have compassion, divine alignment, order. And with ANU Life Global Ministries, the call goes out again, for that unity. When you look around today, we still live in the shadow of Babel. Cultures are still confused, families are still fragmented, nations, of course, are still divided. Religions, they talk about God, but their doctrines are all divided. Their traditions is just all ego. So we're like we're like in Babel 2.0, where there's like this world of confusion, and confusion is normalized and righteousness is mocked. So we live now where living your truth is the big thing, as opposed to living the truth of Yahuwah. But Yahuwah talked about, back then, that things that we should do when he said, "Come out of her, my people, that you share not in her sins, and that you do not receive her plagues." Another shameless song plug. That's Revelations 18:4. But I did that in the song 12 Stones, I think I called it. Confusion of Babel it's not our inheritance. We don't have to take that. So I would say in this season, when you look at ANU Life Global Ministries, it's more than a ministry, it's the restoration of divine government. And we're not gathering under religion. We're not gathering under trends or emotional unity. We're gathering under lawful order. We're gathering under righteous compassion. We're gathering under headship and submission. We're gathering under the name of the house of Anu. So this is why when we say, like, even the title of this segment, we need love to live, because love is not sentiment, it's righteous structure. Love without order is just chaos, just like unity without headship is just rebellion. So when you fellowship without standards, it's just corruption. So love manifests a submission to the divine, and it brings righteous nation building as a result. The scattering is ending now. The confusion is lifting, and the remnant is awakening. So it's time to build now. Not to build towers, but to build the house of Yah, a house rooted in the way of Anu, the unity, the headship, the mercy, the divine pattern. So in order to do that, we have to leave behind personal ego and isolated living. We have to reject false doctrines, um, lawless communities, counterfeit unity, and we have to submit ourselves joyfully to nationhood, to righteous order. If we say we are Anu, then that means we are the we of divine government. the house that's regathered under righteous headship. That's the only unity save, that will save lives. That's the true divine restoration. When you really take some time to consider it, you know, so just like it was in the beginning, it will be again. The scattering is pretty much over for those who have ears to hear. You know, the call has already gone forth to return to Anu, to return to order, because this is the only time we can say with boldness and sort of say with assurance that we do need love to live, you know, and that love is found only under divine submission to Anu, you know, and having, I would hope a better understanding. And I know I said a lot with a couple stories, but let's just recap if you, for those who um, may have taken on a lot and maybe having a little cognitive overload. Anu is not a religion. Anu is not a mythology. Anu is a divine order personified. So in your Sumerian, Anu is the apex and the head of all of the divine hierarchy. An, which you may call heaven, is the domain of Anu. And heaven is, it's not clouds and angels. Uh, heaven is a divine government. It's existence. Before existence. So before there was division, before there was the Torah, before there was the Quran, before there was the Kemetic stories, there was Anu, and Anu was not a tyrant. Anu wasn't a tribal god, but the source of righteous balance. So when we look at that, we know that Anu represents righteous boundaries, correct headship, correct alignment. And there are those who came after Anu, Enlil and Inki. They didn't create the laws. They shouldn't be served. They executed Anu's decrees. So there's even the Torah reflects that pattern. The angels or the Malachim act on behalf of Yah. Anu as an archetype uh, is not simply just like this being that's seated up in the sky, but Anu is headship. It's a spiritual pattern for leadership and for order when you look at Anu. So to be in Anu, it means to really be aligned with the laws of the righteous. It means to be, or I would say to be outside of Anu means that you're in chaos. So returning to Anu is returning to your original righteous mind, becoming yourself, waking back up to yourself, waking back up to your divine instructions, to waking back up to the collective mission that we came here for. And again, I clarified a little bit about what Anu comes before. The Sumerian text, 3300 BCE, the Kemetic text, 2300 BCE, the Torah, 1400 BCE, um, the Avesta or the Zoroastrian Avesta, that's around 1000 BCE. The Quran, 610 CE, completed, 633 BCE. But Anu was already envisioned in the minds of the ancients. So Anu existed when the world was still one, before there was rebellion, before there was confusion, and when you again look at Anu existing across cultures, we're not localizing. In the Anu, the Yoruba, we have mercy, and the Hebrew, we have us, collective identity. In the Arabic, we have Anu as Atom, or the messenger, or the angel. In the Igbo, we have Anu as the essence of life, personified as meat or angel or animals. And Sumerian, we have Anu personified as supreme order. And the Sanskrit, we have Anu as atom, fundamental existence. So what that sort of shows you is that Anu is not tribal. Anu is universal. Anu is a divine order that is remembered across nations even after the scattering. you know. So yes, mankind, kind of men, they did forget, and they rebelled, and they built the Tower of Babel, or Babel, and they said, let us make, ourselves a city and a importance or a tower that will reach to heaven, not for Yahuwah, but for themselves. So that wasn't righteous unity. It was counterfeit. So, and this is just a quick recap. So like I said, when you read it, you understand that Vayed Yahuwah irot et ha'ir be'et migdal. And Yahuwah came down to see what was happening. Transliteration. So that means Yahuwah is not omniscient. I need to go send someone to investigate. So there was a deliberate sort of intervention. Like I said, there was a deliberate mass hypnosis of the people. There was a fracturing of the collective consciousness of mankind. And that tower was intermingling. That was the big thing, the migdal, magnified to make great, not just the physical, the tower was really, really high, but it was a spiritual and social exaltation. So when you combine again the Migdal with the Babel or the Bavel, meaning to confuse or to mingle or to mix, it was understood that intermingling of the wrong things was confusion. It was lawless mixing, trying to have unity without having Yahuwah at the head of it, blending people without divine instruction. So you invite confusion as a result. So now Yahuwah has to come down, not out of curiosity, like, ooh, wonder what's going on, but to stop unity, counterfeit unity. So now a scattering begins. There are languages that are confused. There are cultures that are divided. There are nations that are now fragmented, and Anu becomes forgotten by many, and replaced by empires and different doctrines and religions. So what began as unity now becomes that's your truth, and this is my truth. You know, and like I said, there's still a governance of that sort of thinking today. So now we're in the stage for restoration for those of us who have answered the call, because we weren't left hopeless. There's always, like I said, there's always a remnant. It's always a small remnant, and the pattern today is revealed again. And this is why in ANU we're not a religion. To reiterate, we are divine restorers. I came as a teacher. And this time, my life purpose is to teach righteous compassion, divine headship, lawful order. So needing love to live it's love that's not just a feeling, but love as a structure. And so I came to love you, which is coming to give you the structure, right? And many people rebel against that structure. Okay. But like I said, the confusion is lifting for many others, and the remnants they're awakening and they're building again. And it's not about building physical structures, man. Ain't nobody going in buildings anymore. That era is over. That era has been over for a long time. You know, it's about building unity under mercy, under headship, under divine patterns. Someone has to understand the divine pattern in order to disseminate it to you. Rejecting false doctrines, leaving ego and isolation behind, and the submission to righteous nationhood. Being the we and the us, as is spoken about in the Hebrew, right? So the role of Anu here is to return to what was in the beginning. And what was in the beginning before all of these texts that I gave you years of, it was divine order. It was the knowledge that we need love to live. We need structure in order to live. That was an important thing. And, I felt it was very important to share this in this segment because I think sometimes there's a bit of confusion, as to what ANU is. Like, oh, is it just a community? Somebody once said, y'all just a study group. Okay. Or something like that. Because that's where they left. that's what they could see. That's where they sort of left off. But the reality is that we are a restoration. And if you understand the divine sacredness and the power of what existed before your religions, then you would see why we go so hard for Anu, right? And some of you have that in you already. Some of you, you came into the world and you're constantly looking to be taken out of the world. And what I mean by that, you're always looking up in the sky, looking for an alien to come and abduct you. When you hear things about alien abductions, you're like, oh, what are you going to come for me? What do I have to say? What do I have to do to prove that I want to go up there with you, right? You already have that pulling towards um, on. You have that pulling towards on already. And there are many things that have been established in this world to keep you distracted. For those of you who have that, now, not everyone does. It's okay. Every nation has their own L. Every nation. I am dealing with Anu Nation. So my L is Anu, and for other people, they have other things happening. It's not really my business because I got enough work it's very, very difficult. It's very difficult, and my people don't make it any easier on me. No one cuts me any slack. It is very difficult to wake up my people and to wake them up to this understanding. There are people who are still stomping their feet and saying, why don't you keep talking about Orisha? You used to talk about Orisha. Follow along. If you understand that I am not sitting in one place, this is a movement. And you can get off of the caravan. You could bear your horse wherever you feel most comfortable, right? But never imagine that because you don't hear me repeating the same exact thing for 20 years, that I forgot what I said 20 years ago. Never imagine that I can't still break down the Ifa Odu or break down the I King or break down Kabbalah or break down Voodoo or go into the understandings of Palo, Mayombe, or any other the systems that or even the Bantu cosmology, like the different things that you've heard me teach about. I didn't forget. Like I don't suffer from amnesia or anything like that. Um, it's still here. Like it's still me. It's still me. I wasn't cloned, right? But you have to understand there are things that are to be taught at certain times, and they're awakeners. Like if you're given a meal, you might receive certain things in the beginning of the meal to initiate your appetite. And then as your appetite opens up and your digestive system gets prepared, like, okay, the enzymes start forming, we're about to have some food, your mouth starts salivating to lubricate everything. Then now, okay, we'll give you something else now. And we ease you in, and then you get your main course, right? So if you just come out in the beginning of the main course, you might be like, wow, this is amazing. You want all of it, but now you got a stomach ache. You got acid reflux because you weren't properly prepared for that. Some of you may demand things that you're not prepared for. And this is how those fallen cherubim, that's how they confused you to begin with. That's how they got you caught up. They gave you things that Yah said, not yet. And he said, well, we'll give it to you now. Well, I want it now. See, that's Migdal. That's you're making yourself greater than your time. You see, you're amplifying, you're making yourself important. You see, and pride is the thing that always knocks us out of position. You can get away with a lot of stuff, a lot. Pride is the one that always brings you down. So that's the thing. This is a journey, And some follow along, they get it, and they're like, Chief, I'm with you. I'm rocking with you. Like, how can I be a part of this? How can I build with you or rebuild rather? And some are like, I don't know what he is. He talking about Hebrew stuff. He talking about the Bible. Yesterday he was talking about the Quran. He spent the whole 3 months talking about Zeus and Apollo and and Mars and Aries. What the heck is going on here? I understand some of us have been so trapped by dogma that we don't realize that the dogma translates into other things that we get into. So we might say, "Well, I don't go to church no more. I'm out of the church now." Okay, but you still have the dogmatic thinking of a churchgoer, right? So you enter these other places and you're still functioning on invisible spookism. Everything is still about spookism. You see, so you have this fear of connecting to truth. You have this fear of looking at facts, holding on to facts, and seeing if you can convert them into truth, or gathering the proper information and turning that into knowledge. And information is turned into knowledge by logic. You don't want to do any of that because your dogma has kept you grounded in a place that doesn't work for you, nor does it work for the ministers and the servers of that dogma. And I'm not gonna like name different traditions. Where I'm not gonna do that, but I'm just gonna say, like, some of you got to understand, if you truly are a part of this, ANU is not a dogmatic space. It's not that at all. You heard me speak about the restoration of divine government, right? So this order, this structure, and this is not a feel good. You're not building communities off of charisma and emotion. Rather you're building them off of what's reflected in the heavens. And some of us may have been scattered, but we can trace our DNA back in a certain kind of way where we still hold the truths. And everyone who comes together is a part of that answer. Now, if you say that in the beginning, it's different words that we may use to navigate different spaces and to have different conversations with different people. If you hear me speaking about all of these different traditions, you got to understand, because of the scattering, I got to go to you where you're dead at. I can't go to you if you're alive. I don't need you. You're good. Keep on being alive. Go on by. You got it. But how am I going to resurrect the mentally dead where they're not? They can't come to me. They're mentally dead. So if you're in the church mentally dead, I got to go in the church to go get you. And if you're in the mosque, I got to go in the mosque to go get you. If you're standing in front of your Kohanza, I got to go in front of your Kohanza. Wherever you are, that's my work as a teacher. I have to go where you are to resurrect you. You see? But then I'm going where you are to pull you where you ought to be. And there comes a time where I don't go where you are anymore. You see, now I just stay where I'm at. When the man gets so old, he's not walking around through the earth. Rumula is not going from place to place to teach anymore. Now it's, y'all got to come to me, man. My feet hurt. You got to come over to me. And if you don't, well, maybe next year's Messiah will come find you. But that era is over for me. On to the next thing. You see, we have to stop thinking that certain things exist forever. That's part of the dogma and lazy thinking. Things do change, and believe it or not, that like the Quran says, that Allah always knows where to place His message. So you may be demanding, I want this thing right now. I want, talk about this here, talk about this here. And you don't realize that in every single word that's being given to you, I've already given you the answer. The answer, I've already given it. You go to my websites and stuff, you notice there's no more spiritual consultations. I don't give them anymore. I'm done. And I started shutting that down a couple of years ago. Now you can get business coaching. You can get that. You can get organizational development. You can get strategy coaching as it pertains, again, to primarily leadership and business and executive affairs. But no more spiritual consultations, because I already gave you all the answers. Now, if you're in a space where you shut down because you're triggered by certain terms, then that's unfortunate. Or sometimes your shutdown is, and people have said this before, oh, you talked about that before. I never talk about the same thing twice, ever, ever. I have been doing this work publicly since 1990. I didn't start studying in 1990. I started in the early 80s, but 90 was the first year that I stood in front of people and taught and got a great reception. Many people have those stories about bombing, like comedians that had first time when I was terrible. Probably if I would have been, maybe I would have stopped, to be honest. But it was like jaws dropped. And I think one of the reasons, not just because of what I said was talking about was so profound, but I think because I hardly spoke. So, when I finally opened up my mouth, it was like, okay, his voice is really deep, one. And then the other one was, I didn't know he knew all of that. So I think that was more than me just being, whatever. But yeah, I've been doing this for a very long time. And, you learn what needs to be said when you're obedient to the message. What part of the building do you build when? Regardless of what people are demanding for, because people will crowd around you and demand an idol. Keep talking about the Orisha. How do I do that? Stop asking me for an idol. I'm not going to teach you how to build a golden calf. I'm not doing it. I'm teaching you how to ascend even beyond the books. But I can't jump out and say that just yet, or say how to do it just yet. Because then people will say, oh, he making up his own thing. That's because he ain't never studied nothing. So he telling you don't read the book because he make it. Why? Or you got the people be like, yeah, Chief, I always felt like that. See, I don't read. You don't read because you don't know how to read. You got to read, man. You got to read so you don't have to read. You got to read. Everybody always trying to get around studying. I don't study, man. I just use my intuition. That's why you don't know nothing. That's why nothing's growing in your life, because you're lazy. If you can't read that well, I understand. That's why, look at how good the creator is. We have audiobooks now. You don't even have to know how to read anymore. And even if there's not an audiobook version of what you have, as long as you have a PDF or the text, you could throw it into over 100 different apps, and they'll do voice to text for you. I mean text to voice for you, where the computer or your phone will read it for you. You don't even have to know how to read anymore. You have no excuse. You have to study. You have to. There's no way around that. You see, and it's a development of your mentality that's where your psychic ability comes from, not from you being slow and saying, well, that's why I don't read to study nothing. I just have dreams, like somebody said once. And I just dream everything. That's why I don't study nothing. And this person never knew anything, was always doing something stupid, and is still to this day no longer in ANU and doing stupid things. You ain't ANU, so go over there with the rest of the scattered. Let's filter you out. Go over there with the scattered, right? He was very arrogant, so I could speak like that. But that's the thing, you have to kind of get to that space where you understand how we've been destroyed and scattered. For many of us, it's through the convenience of technology. I'm a tech head. I love technology. But I also understand the damage that technology can do to the psychic abilities. Because when you start to forsake and abandon your ability to cognate, to use your cognition and to formulate certain patterns and abstract thoughts within your own mentality, then you start to weaken the power of your brain. When you start to weaken the power of your brain, you start to lessen and diminish and damp your psychic abilities. That's intentional, because what are psychic abilities? Psychic abilities are inspiration. When you read a certain text and it says, this was inspired by God, what does that mean? What the freak does that mean? That means that the Elohim communicated with that person telepathically. That's what that means. You remember back in the days when your mother and your grandmother would dream the numbers? You notice nobody dreams the numbers anymore. Nobody says, I'm calling, or you get on the phone and said, I ran into you today. I just had a dream about you yesterday. I swear I dozed off. I was at my desk at work. I fell asleep and you were right there. And then today I'm running into you. You don't hear a lot of stories like that anymore, or people even having profound dreams, and having experiences where interdimensional beings are seeking to assimilate themselves into their electrical current. It's still happening, but the minds and the spiritual aura of people have been confused and dampened so much that you're no longer able to assimilate those transmissions anymore. you know, or it's just fog around you. Literally fog, literally fog, literally fog is no longer a mist. See, when we had that mist, that was other beings assimilating, saying, hey, maybe there was something in our aura that was destructive, and they were giving us a pull towards cleaning that. Change your current, change your vibration like this, change it like that. Now we can't hear it, we can't see it. It's just fog. Get this fog out of here. Instead of breathing in the mist. So there are a lot of things that are seeking to keep you from being what you're supposed to be. And, building towers, building mega churches, and building. I know a lot of people always ask what I knew. We get those emails, where can I come? Is there a building where y'all are at? Not yet. Not really stressed for that. Could have been had a building. Don't really want one. We do retreats where we're outside in tents. Building? No. But you can hook your tent up however you want. Because it ain't about the build. Ain't nobody going in the building. That era is over. The era is over. Get into the streets. Hand out information. Download a bunch of copies of the ANU Way and print them out at your job. I mean, print them out. Give them to people here. Even if it's just sections. Could just be a page. Here. That's where the work is. Nobody trying to go up in no building, sit in no uncomfortable shoes and be hot with the fan, and while somebody in front of them screaming and hooping and hollering and jumping all up and down. It ain't gonna be me, because I don't even do all that. I'm too mellow for all that, right? That era is over. You're not building anything like that. You're not expanding and changing the environment like that. You're not. Go to the park, lay down a blanket, light some incense, light a candle, read, and watch how two things are going to come over by you: bees and people. Do that. We got to restore. All right. So I want to thank you all for tuning in. Reminder that the ANU retreat is coming up in June, and I invite you, of course, to participate in that. I feel like there's something else I'm supposed to be telling you about. Announcements are not my ministry, so I always mess them up. The retreat is coming. There's probably some other stuff happening. That's why you got to be subscribed. But there actually is some other things coming up. I'm considering doing a sort of a call-in. I don't know for any of you OG members or OG listeners and supporters. You might remember from back in the Blog Talk radio days when I was doing the live call-ins and stuff like that. I'm considering doing that again. Different format, not Blog Talk radio, but an opportunity for us to build and encourage, inspire each other. So definitely, if that's something you think you might be interested in, and where we can have more real-time exchange, but definitely ordered. Sometimes on Blog Talk, people would go crazy with them dreams. I've been interpreting dreams since I was a child. That was a gift I had. I was born with, you know. And it was my mother who was able to shed some light on that when she said, "Well, you know, my name Yusuf." She said, "Yusuf and is Joseph," and she said, "You know, Joseph would interpret dreams." I said, "Oh, okay, that's interesting. So you cursed me." Nah, but you know, I've always had very profound dreams. I'm always in people's dreams. I'm always like at least once a month, if not more. And I'm pretty sure I'm probably even in more dreams of people just maybe feel awkward about saying something about it. But I'm always in people dreams, not in a salacious way or anything like that, but just, you know, male and female. Just like, yeah, I saw you, Chief, or I'm always helping somebody or pulling somebody out of a snake pit or something like that, or hugging somebody or something, you know. So the dream space is yeah, that's my thing. But you know, we all have our different roles that we play in this space. But this call won't be about me interpreting all of your dreams, you know, about you being married to Rihanna and ASAP Rocky at the same time. And, you know, I'm not doing that. Like, yeah, but more us moving forward towards the restoration of the village and the nation. We got to get to that space. We have to get to that space. There's no way around it, you know, and it begins with the development of self and then extends outward to the development of family. But it all has to be under the right rulership and headship. And I know for some of the things, I'll just share this, you know, sometimes I see in the comments opposition. If you are not a person who abides by Torah or the ANU doctrine, then the things that I'm saying will seem very foreign and maybe even unnecessary to you. Like, why we gotta do all that, you know? And I understand that. And I do value and appreciate everyone's potential to communicate and to express themselves. But there was really no but. And uh, if you are not a part of this culture, then it may not make sense, you know. So I'm not, this is the things that we talk about here are not a broadcast for the world, even though it kind of seems like it could be, to say, well, you know, you're supposed to do that. It's for our new, it's for our Nubians. And of course, if you're not a part of this movement, you could dip your foot in and out and get some good life advice and like, oh, I could try that, I could apply that, you know. And it will work for you, right? It will work. It's like picking through your plate. You take what you want, take what you and leave what you don't want. I don't advise that, but you do whatever you feel like doing. But on record, I don't advise that. We have to have whole submission in order to have a whole and full response. You know, that's just the way the universe works. But you do whatever you want to do. You know, no one can force you to submit. In fact, I don't really even like to use the word submission that much, to be honest with you. I know it may seem like it, like because I use it, but I actually prefer the word acceptance. You know, because sometimes the mental image that's drawn up when you say submission, and this could me also be coming because I used to train in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, and I trained in Brazilian Jiu Jitsu for a long time. So we use terms like submit and submission, you know, or like tap out, as you may be familiar with. But so maybe it just brings it up in my mind, you know. But you could be forced to submit. You know, I can put you in an arm bar, you know, and triangle lock and force you to submit, you know. But to accept is something else because you know, you mentally you decide. Like, so I could say, you know, I submit to the will of the Most High, or I could say I accept the will of the Most High because I do have a choice, you know. But either one is fine, you know, that you want to use. But submission is a powerful word too, to come under the mission, you know, and I will use both interchangeably. So I'm not outlawing submission. Keep using the word submission. It's a good word. Um, but throw accept in there once in a while and see what that does to your aura. All right. But yeah, like I said, this is always a call to unity. And for those of you who resonate with the things that I shared today and resonate with the idea of restoring the oneness and the order of ANU that occurred before we magnified our own sense of importance and magnified intermingling and confusion. Does it sound like separatism? Probably. Is he a separatist? Yes, he is. I am a separatist. Do for self, get with your own, and be yourself, as said by the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. You know, we have to get with our own. And getting with your own starts with inside of you. Do you get with you? Do you be yourself with you? You know, before I'm even myself with you, right? I know for those listening to the podcast might be like, what? But, you know, am I myself, you know, when I'm in my interior universe? Do I accept myself within my interior universe? You know, when it says get with your own. So that way now I can accept my own in my exterior universe. Okay, so that is enough. We're going to have study sessions soon internally. So I'm going to go uh, grab me some water and some green juice for that. All right. But thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for all those who subscribe, who like, who comment. I do read every comment, as I always say. And sometimes I even reference the comments in the segments that I do. I say, like, it was commented. And for those who've come to the Facebook ANU Life Global Village group, you know, like I said, I know it's still a fairly new group, and you know, but thank you for those who've come in, and willfully you've gotten something out of that experience as well. I've been really working to make sure every day I put some sort of gem in that space. But let me know how you feel about maybe me doing a live segment. It'll probably be like over Zoom or something like that. And if you'd be interested in yeah, tuning into something like that, but also if you could see yourself actually engaging with me, you know, in that sort of context, or if you might feel too shy, let me know. All right. Until such time, I am Chief Yuya Head Jegna of the ANU Nation and Head Minister of the ANU Life Global Ministries. Thank you so much for being present with me. Shabbat Shalom.